We've been screamed supply crisis till we're blue in the face. But until we start building the right type of supply, we're not in a supply crisis. It's an affordability crisis. It's been created by ourselves and our policies and our greed. Hey there, people. Welcome back to episode number 18 of the Under the Radar Real Estate Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Josh. We are going to be breaking down the TREB market stats from September 2024. It is now October 2024. I should probably be calling this the Oktoberfest podcast. But it'll be really interesting to see what the numbers look like from last month. I mean, to be honest, with rate cuts and new mortgage rules and kind of the sentiment changing around housing and a lot of stimulus in the market, I think the expectation was that the market would come back with a bang. But to be honest, I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers yet, but just what I'm seeing and what I've seen over the last month, things didn't really come roaring back. I think, a lot of people had certain expectations, but I didn't necessarily feel things roar back. Inventory spiked, and the buyers that I have and the buyers that I've spoken to don't seem to be just jumping right back into things. But that's neither here nor there. Let's get to what you're here for, and that's the market stats. So right behind me, I'm going to be posting my screen. You should see it right here, right now. So let's click the link. Let's see what they said. So, I mean, first off, the headline says, September home sales improve over last year. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Looking at numbers from last year aren't really indicative of where the market's at right now. And that's been the case for the last few years with Toronto. But the Toronto Real Estate Board, they stick to year over year stats, and that's what they're going to keep going with, right? And it works for their narratives. Anyhow, let's look at what the blurb says. So as buyers take advantage of changes to mortgage lending guidelines and borrowing costs trend lower, home sales will steadily increase in relation to population growth. With every rate cut, a growing number of GTA households will afford a long-term investment in home ownership, including first-time home buyers. And that's the statement from the Toronto Real Estate Board. Jennifer Pierce, who's the president, put that out. I'm sure she didn't write that herself. It was the note that came from the Toronto Real Estate Board. So what do I take just from that statement alone? Again, they're trying to make the numbers look a little bit better than what they are. Already, I haven't looked at the numbers yet, but what that statement tells me is that sales weren't where they wanted them to be. They said, basically the statement says like, hey, cuts are happening and rules are changing, and it's going to take a little bit of time. The way I read this, they're saying it's going to take a little bit of time for the things to really start trickling down into more sales. So let's open up the Market Watch report. A lot of words right here. We're going to get right into the meat of it. Let's get right into the report. If you wanted to read that, I'm sure you can find that online anywhere. All right. So let's look at the numbers. So let's first zoom in just to the year over year numbers for the overall GTA. So sales, we are at just under 5,000 sales, which is up 8.5% over last year. But already I'm going to point to these two numbers right here, and I'm seeing this in the market myself. I have a listing right now, and there's a lot of competition in the marketplace right now. If you're a seller and you have a listing on the market, we have 18,000 new listings that hit the market in September. And we have that now leads to over 25,000 listings on the market in the GTA. And that's up 35% over last year. So it's 35% more properties on the market this year than there were last year. Average price over last year is actually down, and that's not surprising at all, especially when there's that much more inventory on the market. If we look at these numbers now, it says to me, just without even looking at any of the other numbers, we are still in a buyer's market with that much inventory, that much choice. Really quickly, without even looking at anything else in this report, I can already say we're in a buyer's market. Average days on market, we're at 27. Average property days on market, 43. So it's taking 43 days for a property to sell. And again, not surprising. That's up 43% over last year. So 43 days on market, up 43%. A funny number. But it, again, doesn't surprise me that prices are down slightly because there's so much choice. And it's taking properties a lot longer to sell, again, because buyers have a lot of choice. Now, if we look into just the specific 416 numbers, this is a Toronto-based YouTube account, Toronto-based podcast. So we are going to look at the Toronto numbers specifically. So sales, detached houses are still the king in Toronto. There was almost 600 detached houses that sold. Semi-detachers was 180, townhouses 158, and condos was just over 850, so 864 condos sold. So when we look at that as a change, detached houses were up 10% more sales than last year, semis up 13, but townhouses down almost 9%, and condos, I mean, relatively flat, up 2% over last year. But, and this is really interesting, and I've noticed this as well, pricing is down pretty much across the board. I mean, semi-detaches are level with last year, and maybe townhouses also as well. And, you know, semis down up 1.3%, and townhouses only down 1.7%. So let's say those are relatively flat to last year. 1% isn't a massive change. But when we look at detached house prices down 2.4% over last year, and condos down 3.5% over last year. And I know I started off this podcast saying looking at numbers over last year are really indicative of where the market's at. What I'm going to do actually in a minute is I will go to another chart that'll show the kind of month-to-month values. That'll give us a much better, I think, a clearer picture of where the market is trending. And without necessarily looking at that chart, I can already say, I wouldn't be shocked if month-over-month pricing is starting to kind of dip down again, especially with this much inventory. It's really tough for sellers to command super high price points when there's this much inventory in the market. So it doesn't shock me that a lot of these prices are down year over year when inventory is spiking the way it is. Now, and maybe I should just kind of quickly go over the prices for anyone who's listening to this from an audio standpoint. Actually, and I think our first 2 episodes of this podcast, I had them audio, kind of gave up on it for a bit, went straight to YouTube. This podcast is coming back to audio. So this is going to be uploaded to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you just want to listen to it while you're at the gym or in the car or whatever, I'll have it up on audio as well. So detached house prices in the 416, just under 1.7 million at 1685755. I'll zoom into it here for the ones who are watching. Semi-detached house prices, just like a hair under 1.3 at 1.299 million. Townhouses, just under $1 million at 978,000, and condos been hovering around $700,000 now for what feels like a couple of years. So the condos haven't really changed in price now for a little while. We had the big dip last year, and they've kind of just held steady ever since. They haven't really had any major fluctuations in price. Now let's look at some of the under the radar stats. This is the Under the Radar Real Estate Podcast. So we are not just going to look at it was good to give us some context with the overall numbers, but we are now going to look at some of the under the radar stats. And those who have been watching the podcast from day one, you know that those 2 stats are the SNLR, or the sales to new listings ratio, and then the MOI, which is the months of inventory. So there are 2 stats that give us a good temperature and read of where the market's at. And these are indicators that they're trending indicators. So they'll give us an idea of where things are headed as we move forward into the fall. So again, Toronto-based podcast, we're going to look at the City of Toronto numbers specifically. So those of you watching on YouTube, you'll see the numbers just right above here. So the City of Toronto is highlighted in black. So the sales to new listings ratio for the City of Toronto came in at 37%. So what that means is only 37% of the new listings that hit the market in September sold. So about a third of the new listings that hit the market in September sold. In a busy market, So in a seller's market, usually that number should be above 50%. During the pandemic, we saw that number as high as 70%. So 50 to 70% of the homes that were getting listed in a specific month were selling. Now we're well below 50%. We're only about a third. So this tells me that we're still in a buyer's market for the overall city of Toronto. Now, you can go into sub-neighborhoods, and we'll go through those in a second and look to kind of see where things are a little bit tighter. But overall, we are in buyer's market territory. So months of inventory tell the same thing. So months of inventory is sitting at 3.8. What months of inventory means is that if there were not to be another listing that hit the market over the next little bit, it would take 3.8 months to sell off all the inventory in Toronto. So compare Toronto to other markets, that could seem like, hey, that's a great number. Especially, I mean, I look at properties in Florida, for example, and 3.8 months of inventory is a great number there. But here, and in some of the peaks of the market when things were really moving, we saw months of inventory well under 2. So this, again, as a stat that tells me we are still firmly in a buyer's market. There is a lot of inventory and a lot of choice. So buyers are taking their time to snap up whatever real estate is on the market. Now, if we were to look kind of closely at neighborhoods in Toronto, the last time we've done this, there's always been a few neighborhoods that have kind of stood out. And again, there's a couple of neighborhoods. Now, for the most part, these numbers are pretty uniform right across the city. I mean, there aren't too many if we look at it right here, so if you're following along on YouTube, you'll see right here. So we'll follow the SNLR trend, and we look through the different neighborhoods. So the W neighborhoods are west, the C are central neighborhoods, and the E are in the east end. There's only, as it stands, one neighborhood that's at 50%, which is E03. That's the only neighborhood that saw about half of the new listings that hit the neighborhood sell. So it means every single neighborhood in Toronto is below that 50% threshold, which signals that we are in a buyer's market. If we look at months of inventory, that same neighborhood that's at 50%, it's below 2 months of inventory. So that makes sense. And so it's trending in the right direction towards, I would still say around 2 is a balanced market. So that market at 50% sales and listings ratio and about 2 months of inventory, they're in balanced market territory. So neither in buyer's or seller's market. And then E02, kind of the same thing. So some of the East End neighborhoods are kind of more balanced market territory where their sales and listing ratio is at 50 or maybe just below, and then their months of inventory is hovering around the 2 mark. But then when we look at the rest of the city, the numbers change completely, right? I mean, everything is well below 50%, except for a couple of neighborhoods in the West End that are trending towards 50% in around 2. But for the most part, I'm not going to make this much more long-winded than that. Ultimately, numbers show we are still in a buyer's market, maybe balanced in some cases, but for the most part, buyer's market territory. So one quick note I'll kind of give to anyone watching this, there's opportunity out there. And I'm working with buyers right now, and I'm kind of telling them, hey, there's certainly opportunity in the market. And some of the opportunity isn't necessarily maybe going to be 100% of your wish list, but if you can find properties out there that are maybe 50 to 70% of your wish list, and you can negotiate the prices down, especially properties that have been sitting on the market for 30, 40, 50 plus days. At that point in time, I mean, as a realtor and anyone would kind of be able to deduce pretty quickly is that if your property's been on the market that long, I mean, at some point you'd want to sell, and there has to be a certain price you'd want to sell it at. And buyers out there, I'd say, hey, I mean, take advantage of those opportunities. Not say like, hey, you got to hammer those sellers and get prices down. But I mean, the reality of the situation is if those people do truly want to sell, there's probably a price out there that they'd be willing to part with that property for. And for buyers out there that have been kind of on the sidelines, I mean, yeah, rates are coming down a little bit, and there's some new mortgage rules out there that, I mean, if you watch my other videos, I mean, I don't know if I'm a huge fan of some of the new rules. I mean, they help people take on a lot more debt over a longer period of time, which financially doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if it puts you in a position where if you're going to approach real estate the way you should be for a long-term hold, carrying a little bit more debt for a longer period of time might not be the end of the world, but by no means should anyone be pushing themselves to their limit and carrying a lot more debt, because it just doesn't make any financial sense. And at that point, wait a little bit longer, rent, live with family, do what you have to do, save up a little bit more, and don't really try to push yourself and take on a whole bunch more debt, because it doesn't make any sense. But that's an aside. There are some programs and things out there that are making the purchase of real estate a little bit easier, and now might be the time to really get into that. I mean, at some point, inventory will come down, and as inventory does come down, the prices will invariably start to move upwards. So I'd say right now we're still in a scenario where there's a window of opportunity in the market. I mean, there's going to be some trolls out there who are saying the prices are still going to come down further. Well, the only way prices come down further is if you actually offer to start purchasing properties, right? So there has to be things that trigger price decreases, right? So if you're not out offering on properties and you're just trolling online, you're not actually getting prices lower, right? So you actually have to offer to purchase properties, and these properties have to get their prices the price has to be posted online for to create comparables to get the prices down if you want them to come down. I'm not here advocating that prices should necessarily drop across the board. I mean, in certain cases, certain sellers might be kind of pushing things or holding on a little bit too long. But anyhow, another side tangent. Let's get back to what you're here for. So now we understand the numbers on the overall market in the city of Toronto. Some of you who are watching this and are following the channel, you are here for the under the radar neighborhood. So the under the radar neighborhoods that we target on the channel is in the old city of York. Most of you watching this, you may have an understanding what York was or what it was before it was an amalgamation, but it is effectively Eglinton West, Weston, and St. Clair West. So if we were to look at it on a map, you're pretty much looking, let's say, from almost Yonge Street over to the Humber River, upwards of like Lawrence, the 401, down to about St. Clair. So that's the old city of York in Toronto, and that's what we focus on here in this channel. So when we look at those numbers in specific, and we have the average prices right here, you can see on the screen, but we're going to actually scroll down to the HPI. I like using the HPI index because it's a bit more of a smoothed out version of the stats. It gets rid of kind of the highs and the lows, and I actually feel it gives you a much more accurate read on where pricing is at currently in the market when we look at the home price index versus the average price. So look at it more of a median rather than an average, if that makes any sense. So when we look at the under the radar neighborhood, so we're going to be looking at the neighborhoods of W03, W04, and C03. So when we look at the average price in these numbers, and we'll compare them to the city of Toronto. So W03 right away, average price $985,000. When we compare that to the average in the city of Toronto of just over $1 million, city of Toronto is $1,051,000. Already, you can see significant savings on the overall average over the overall city. When we look at W04, so W04 is more up into Weston, you have Briar Hill, and some of these neighborhoods up there. We're looking at an average of $903,000. So that's more Eglinton West and Weston. $900,000 is an average. So we're looking at, that's $150,000 savings over the overall average in the city of Toronto. And again, for those of you watching this channel, you might already know this, but for those of you who are new, welcome. But York, when we look at it on a map versus where this downtown of the city is, we're not that far. We're within, I mean, I've walked downtown I live up in Eglinton West. I have walked downtown from my neighborhood, and I've walked downtown. It's taken me about 45 minutes. I'm a quick walker, and it's downhill. Walking back is another story. But walking to downtown from here, because it's all downhill, and if you're a quick walker, you can do it in about 45 minutes. Transit, you can get downtown, depending on where you're at, if you're close to a transit stop, 20, 25, 30 minutes from most places. If you live in Weston, you can jump on the Up Express and be downtown in 20 minutes. That's from the Up Express in Weston to Union Station in 20 minutes, which is wild. And then, as you all know, there's the Croston LRT that hopefully will get built at some point in the future. That'll also speed up the transit in the neighborhood, which is why we target these neighborhoods. And I live here and I think it's super under the radar. But anyway, getting back to the numbers, $900,000 as an average versus $150,000 in the city of Toronto, which is a massive savings. And then when we look at CO3, again, if you follow this channel, you already know it, but if you don't, you'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? How is a neighborhood that averages almost $1.6 million under the radar? It's a $530,000 premium over the overall average in the city of Toronto. But one thing to note in C03 is that most of the product in the neighborhood right now is detached homes, right? So there's a lot of detached homes. And then the neighborhood where it's located geographically, it's neighboring some pretty expensive neighborhoods, kind of. I mean, the neighborhood right next to it, which is C04, the average there is $2.1 million. And when you look at it like geographically and where CO3 and CO4, it's like right next to one another, right? So they're right next to each other. So we're talking like Forest Hill, Lawrence Park, some of these neighborhoods. So you're just going slightly south. So when we compare those two neighborhoods, you are saving 500 grand by moving into C03, which is kind of like Forest Hill South, really. And you're talking about neighborhoods like Oakwood Village and kind of parts of St. Clair West. So you're saving $500,000. You're still being able to take advantage of a lot of the amenities and some of the school districts that you have in CO4. And you're living in neighborhoods that, on average, are $500,000 less than what you would in a Lawrence Park or Upper Forest Hill and so on and so forth. So from that standpoint, CO3 is grouped at the under the radar neighborhoods because it's the under the radar luxury neighborhood, one of the most under the radar neighborhoods for luxury product, not only in, Toronto, probably the province and maybe Canada. I haven't done all the analysis, so don't come yelling and screaming at me with pitchforks, but I would put good money that it's probably near there in terms of like value for luxury style product. We can quickly kind of take a look into some of these neighborhoods and product types, because that's when things start getting really interesting, especially when we look at W03 and W04. So W3 and W04, you're really into St. Clair West, Eglinton West, and Weston. When we look at single family detached houses specifically, that's where you're finding a ton of savings in these neighborhoods. So the average for a detached house in W03, for example, is under 1.1 million. So it's $1.06 million effectively, where the average of the city of Toronto is over 1.6, right? So it's almost a $600,000 savings over the overall average in the city of Toronto. And then when we look at W04 is closer to 1.2, but still at $400,000+ less than the overall average in the city of Toronto. And you're in the city of Toronto. So we're not talking about, a lot of times when we look at the city of Toronto, people feel like, okay, well, I have to move out to the far off suburbs to be able to buy a detached house. And these numbers tell a different story, a completely different story. You can live in the 416, TTC access or Up Express GO train access to downtown to Toronto in under 30 minutes. So you're not sitting on the DVP, you're not sitting on the Queensway, you're not sitting on the 401 for multiple hours in standstill traffic to try to get to work downtown. And I know some of you maybe only work 2 to 3 days in the office, but still, even one day sitting in traffic drives me batty, right? So you can live in the city for a significant discount in a detached house versus what other detached houses would sell for, outside the city. If you look at all the TREB zones, overall average for the entire Toronto Real Estate Board is almost 1.4 million. So you're still saving a ton of money if you were to look at a detached house in one of these neighborhoods over one of the suburbs. So to me, again, it's under the radar, but I don't believe these neighborhoods are going to stay under the radar that much longer. For every month or every period of time that this crosstown LRT is delayed, it just keeps that window open for people to look at properties in these neighborhoods. Because once that crosstown LRT opens, I guarantee you things are going to change. a little story for you. There's this developer, great developer in the city of Toronto, building exactly what the city of Toronto needs. A lot of small infill condominium projects in the city called Blue Lion Build. So great developer. I've looked at a ton of his properties. I've had clients kind of indirectly live in some of those properties. The old brokerage I worked for sold a lot of his product. Anyhow, builds a lot of these small infill condo projects throughout downtown, right? So we buy a little detached house and put 2 to 3 units on the property. So either tear it down or convert the property into 2 to 3 condos. So you'd have these small little condo projects in established neighborhoods throughout downtown Toronto. But just the other day, I noticed he was up in Fairbank, and he was posting a whole bunch of different properties that he looked like he was starting to look at Fairbank, which Fairbank is the jewel of the end of the radar neighborhoods. The topography of Fairbank is almost like San Fran. It has all these rolling hills and it's green. And if you're watching this on YouTube, head to my video on Fairbank and you'll see, I mean, it's a quiet neighborhood. It's bounded by Eglinton and Dufferin and Rogers Road. And you'd think that would be noisy, but you can go 20, like not even 10 meters in from Dufferin and you don't even hear Dufferin. And there's so many trees, there's a good canopy there and it's insulated. But anyhow, this developer, Blue Lion, is starting to move that concept that he was doing downtown into this neighborhood and building condos because he believes in the neighborhood. I mean, I had a quick chat with them on social media. We were DMing back and forth, and he was kind of telling me, he's like, yeah, I believe in Fairbank, right? And a lot of people who have those real estate minds look at Fairbank and they're like, I don't understand how this neighborhood hasn't completely exploded yet. I mean, some of that is just due to some of the infrastructure, right? I mean, it's coming. And while it sucks right now that we don't have that crosstown LRT operating right now, because it should have been since 2021, and it really sucks for those of us who live here right now. But those of you who are looking for opportunities in Toronto real estate, this is the opportunity. So every month this thing gets delayed, extends that opportunity, right? So every roadblock that we hit about not getting this thing open, I just saw an article today saying that it's likely not even going to open in 2024. But that means we have, what, another 3-4 months, 5 months, 6 months of a window before the crosstown LRT opens. And that's when things start to get a bit more expensive, because for the most part, a lot of you watching this, you're like, I don't want to move in until it's open. But if you're willing to take a little bit of pain, I mean, sitting on a Dufferin bus, not great, but a little bit of paying for 6 months, I mean, hopefully not a year, but maybe 6 months to a year, but be able to save a ton, a couple $100,000 probably in the purchase of your house. To me, it seems like a great deal. So long-winded way to say there's an opportunity in some of these under the radar neighborhoods, and maybe holler, reach out to me, right? You don't even have to be buying right now. Any of you watching this, I know sometimes you work with a realtor, you feel pressured. Talk to my clients, I am zero pressure as an agent. I give you the information to let you make your decisions on your own. If you just want to reach out and say, hey, I want to go look at 3, 4, 5 properties in some of these under the radar neighborhoods, like Fairbank or St. Clair West, Eglinton West, Weston, reach out. I'd be more than happy to take you on a little tour and kind of show you the neighborhood. I live up here and I worked up here, and I have a lot of clients looking in these neighborhoods, right? All the time I have clients who are like, they didn't want to necessarily look. And then just the other day I was out with a client and we were in the neighborhood and she was like, I never realized how nice and neighborhood feeling some of these areas were. You drive down Eglinton and it's a ghost town because of what the crosstown LRT did to some of these storefronts and some of these areas along Eglinton. It's absolutely horrid what they did. It created all these empty storefronts, but those storefronts will come back to life once the crosstown LRT opens, and the neighborhoods are still vibrant and they're still there. And you'd be surprised on the neighborhood feel and everything in these areas, right? And I know a lot of you that are young parents look at schools and school ratings and all that. And yeah, the school ratings, for the most part, maybe not be super high on the Fraser ranking, but there are schools, when you look at the EQAO scores and so on and so forth, in these neighborhoods that have quite high scores and are trending in the right way. And remember, Fraser report data includes a lot of demographic and income data that really shouldn't be included in a score report. It really should just be the X's and O's, right? The EQAO. So if you look at the EQAO website, you'll see that there are a lot of schools up here in this popular city that do quite well. So all that's to say is reach out. Reach out. I'd be more than happy to take a tour of some of the under the radar neighborhoods in the area. All right. So last thing before we jump into the month to month statistics, which I promised, and we'll get to in a minute. Let's just we can kind of look just quickly at a little overview of where we were last year and this year and kind of look at some of the trends, right? So last year was one of the worst years in real estate, but if you look at the average prices, they're still trending higher than they were this year. And this year, things are moving the other way, right? So interest rates are down from where they were last year, and pricing is lower than what it was last year, right? I mean, look at September last year, we were over 1.1, and September this year, well over like 1.18, and this year we're at 1.07. So we're below where we were last year with lower rates. So already just looking at some of these numbers here and things, I would say that we are likely at this inflection point where there's a lot of inventory and pricing's low, but inventory will start getting snapped up. And I think we're going to start seeing a reversal probably not until 2025. So anyone watching this, I think if you're a buyer, there's still a window of opportunity. I know realtors have been saying, hey, window opportunities now. I'm not one who's going to sell these things and not believe and not say things that I don't necessarily believe. I do believe there is a window of opportunity right now. I think that that window will likely close as we move into 2025. So let's now, I promised it, and let's jump into, let's look at the trends in stats over the last few months. Just to give you guys, because I start off this podcast saying, hey, I don't really trust year-over-year stats because they can be a little bit bogus sometimes. Or not bogus, they're real, they're all real stats. But they don't really give you a clear picture of where the market's at right now. We want to know where the market's at right now, where things are trending, right? We already looked at the sales to new listings ratio, months of inventory that kind of gives a trend on sales. But let's see where the numbers are at. So I'm pulling up the HPI dashboard, which is what we use right now. So I have it right here on the screen. Hopefully you can see it right here. So these are all the Toronto neighborhoods, and this is their composite number. I know I could have just had this one trend line, but I like to kind of have them all here because you can see them all independently, and you'll see that they're all kind of doing the same thing this year, which is flat. Like flatter than flat. I mean, so numbers kind of started the year in January at a certain point, and most of these neighborhoods have stayed the same, right? So January to now. But let's get this a little tighter, and let's look at July to now. And again, still fairly flat. But if you look, and numbers are flat in some neighborhoods, they may be slightly curving up, but some of them if you actually kind of look closely, right, there's a few of them who are starting to dip down a little bit, right? And that just kind of points to the fact that even if a lot of these numbers are in, what I think trending down might only be like $5,000 to $10,000 in some of these places. But really, when we look at the current financial environment with mortgage rates down and new mortgage rules and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it really should have sparked things and should have sparked some activity and created a bit more competition in the market, brought more buyers in, but it didn't, right? It really, and there's a couple of factors. I think number one is that I think sellers saw all this great news, and investors, so not only people who needed to buy and sell for themselves and just move up the property ladder or move down or whatever, people who normally transact, I think a lot of investors saw the current climate and wanted to take advantage and said, hey, you know what? Things are changing. I want to take advantage of this potential euphoria in the market. But that euphoria never happened, right? So now we're in a position where there's a lot of inventory. The buyers didn't rush back in. So that's number two. The buyers didn't rush back in. Why is that? I think the problem is, and I've talked about this in other videos on my YouTube channel, especially recently, is that while we talk about supply and demand, and we are in a supply crisis, but it's complicated because I think the main crisis that we have in housing here in the Western world, but specifically here in Toronto, is an affordability crisis more than necessarily supply. And I think the numbers, even currently where they're at, even with rates coming down, they haven't come down quite far enough to really to put buyers in a position where they're able to afford their monthly payments on the mortgage. And I think some of the rules, like allowing only 5% down on properties over $1 million, might help a few people. But if we look at $1.5 million, for example, if you're only putting 5% down as a down payment on a $1.5 million property, you have to have incomes of a combined $350,000 to $400,000 to be able to afford those payments, right? And that's on like the razor edge, right? In most cases, you'd say you'd want to have significant income to be able to cover that if you're only putting 5% down. So I think ultimately we're still in an affordability crisis, which, yes, we need supply, but we need a certain type of supply. And this is one thing that's not talked about, because if you look at the condo market, for example, and actually I'll pull it up so I'm not just sit here talking and not backing up my talk with numbers, and we'll see it in real time right here. The condo market, you can look at it in the city of Toronto. I'll go active listings, and let's go, Toronto. So there's, you can see it here on the screen, 6,743 condos listed for sale in the city of Toronto right now. Right? That's a big number. So, I mean, we could talk about supply crisis all we want, but there's 6,000 properties that people could buy right now. Right? But what type of supply is this? And this is the thing that we don't talk about enough, and I don't hear it enough. I mean, some media outlets talk about it, but I don't really hear the politicians talk about it. I mean, they need to talk about certain types of supply, like extending out the suburbs and building into the green belt and all that kind of stuff. Okay, sure, old way of thinking, but ultimately what I see on the ground every day with my clients is that a lot of people do actually still want to live in the city of Toronto, and they want to be able to live, play, and work. Live and play close to work. And we just aren't building, and we don't have the right type of supply in the city core. Right? There was I'll see if I can find it, and I'll paste it into this podcast, but online, I forget who posted it. Someone had posted it, and I'll see if I can get it here. If I can find it, it'll be right here behind me. But they posted that Toronto is actually losing kids, and not like kids are getting lost in the street. There's less kids downtown today than there were years ago, and we're bleeding children, right? Like there's a lot of suburbs around Toronto. The population of children is increasing, but population of children in the city of Toronto is reducing. It's not because people don't want to raise their kids here. We just don't have the housing stock. Right? We went through decades where we were building tiny little studios and one bedrooms to investors, expecting that these things would be filled by kind of upwardly mobile people forever, but they aren't. Right? Eventually people at some point decided they'd want to have kids, or they want to have a little bit more space, and a little studio or one bedroom just doesn't suffice. I have 2 kids. I can't live in a 550 square foot one bedroom, 1+10. It doesn't work. Even some little small little 2 bedrooms that builders have been building as of late that are sub 700 square feet, it doesn't really work for a family, right? So developers want to be absolved from this and say, well, building costs and this, that, and the other, but I mean, they play a role in all this, right? And they were selling to the easiest buyer, which were investors. Right? Investors were lapping up a lot of those small condos because, again, even for investors, it was an affordability thing, right? Especially a lot of mom and pop investors. It was really tough for them to be able to, let's say if we look 10 years ago, I'm not talking about recently, but 10 years ago, 2013, 2014, when a 2-bedroom condo started at $600,000 in the high $500,000 range. A lot of those investors, and I was working at that point in time with some of them, for them, it's like, hey, I can buy a little one bedroom for $350,000, right? And rent that out for $1,600, $1,700 a month. I'm not going to buy the $550,000 in. Back to those days, myself and my old business partner, Brandon Ware, actually more my mentor than business partner, we were sounding the alarms back then. We were saying, hey, there is an opportunity for people out there to buy some of these 2-bedroom condos, because we knew that even back then, we could see that the writing was on the wall in the city of Toronto, and there wasn't going to be a lot of inventory of those a decade on plus down the road, because builders weren't building it. So the screamed supply crisis till we're blue in the face. But until we start building the right type of supply, we're not in a supply crisis. It's an affordability crisis. It's been created by ourselves and our policies and our greed, right? So we can only all blame ourselves ultimately, but the only way out of this is, unfortunately, and a lot of maybe my more libertarian folks, is more regulation. So, right? So when builders do start building again, they can't just keep pumping the market with more micro 1-bedroom and studio units. It just doesn't work. We actually have to start building things like Blue Lion, like that I talked about earlier in this podcast. That is one developer who's actually building things that the city needs. He's building 2-3-bedroom large condos in established neighborhoods where there's already the infrastructure for families. He's building things where it's like you can move into a neighborhood that already has a neighborhood school, already has neighborhood amenities, parks, so on and so forth, other kids, right? There's already those things there. He's building it. We need to encourage more builders like that and less of these tall skyscrapers full of 1-bedrooms. We have enough of those. And here, let me go back to this. I'm on a bit of a rant right now, but I want to give you guys an example. So if I look at bedroom totals 0 to 1, and then we'll go back to looking what the inventory is, right? So 0 to 1, 1,568. And we'll go, actually, that's total bedrooms. Let's actually go just straight up bedrooms. Let's go 1-bedroom. Let's check it out. 2,714 out of the 6,700. Right, so already a third of the condos on the market are just 1-bedroom condos. Right, so let's go 0. 300, so we're up to 3,000 of the 6,700 condos that are on the market won't fit a family. Won't. I mean, I don't even have to look at the size of these. They won't. It won't suit a family. And now if we look at like 2 bedrooms and see what that brings up, I mean, it's almost 3,000. However, let's look at size, because this will be differentiator. All right, let's see, so out of the 3,000 2-bedrooms that are currently on the market, let's see how many are above 900 square feet. $1,600. So out of 6,700, and it's a big number, and the media will say, hey, almost 7,000 condos currently on the market. Are we in a supply crisis? So on one hand, and I started this like, no, but it's a type of supply. It's only 1,600 of the almost 7,000 condos, or I should say 6,700, are above 900 square feet. Right, so above 900 square feet is truly when you're getting into family-sized dwellings. Right, so I mean, all this to say, and even when I look at this, like how many of these are going to be, let's say, below $800,000? $600. So 600 of those, so half of those 900 plus square foot condos that are for sale right now are below $800,000. So this is what I'm saying, right? It's not necessarily that we are in a supply crisis, but we have to talk about the type of supply, right? The type of supply, because it's only 634 families, what I would call family-sized condos, right, are below 800. Maybe I should add 3 bedrooms to that, actually, now that I look at it, and see if that changes at any. Go with 920. So live 900, just under 1,000 family-sized condos below $800,000 for sale right now. That's still a big number. I think there's an opportunity there. And if anyone watching this, you want to find out where these are, hit me up. We can break this down. We can actually look. I'll make a separate video actually showing where we can find these family-sized condos, because a lot of them are going to be right here in this area right here in the northwest pocket of the city, and then a lot of them in the east end as well. We get to Scarborough. So there are some opportunities for families looking at family-sized condos in the city of Toronto near transit. So ultimately, I didn't want to get here at the podcast. Got a little fiery here at the end. But it just kind of gives you an idea of where we're at, right? You're going to hear a lot of stuff in the news about supply crisis and all that kind of stuff. What really needs to be talked about in our market is affordability crisis. That is the word. We have an housing affordability crisis that needs to be addressed, right? So number one, it's building more, but building more of a certain type of property, right? It has to be more family-sized apartment or condos or townhouses in areas of the city where people want to live, number one. Number two, it has to be more rental. And this is where the government steps in. They have to get back into building homes again, right? I remember when I first started in real estate, the city trying to selling off a lot of their houses that they had in neighborhoods. Just selling it off. And most of the people buying them just turned them into single-family homes. Some of these properties were duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, got purchased on the market and got converted to single-family dwellings instead of staying as a duplex or triplex. The city could have sold these homes and say, hey, if it was already a duplex, has to stay a duplex. They didn't. So that's number two. They have to get back into the rental game again and creating more rentals for people to be able to afford. Because even as a realtor, I understand that like not everyone can just buy right away, but if someone can have an affordable rental and able to save month to month and save up a down payment, they eventually become a buyer and then they can help me out. Yeah, you can watch the show. I have a career where I help people buy and sell real estate. So I do have a vested interest in people being able to buy real estate, but they can't buy real estate when their rent is through the roof, right? So if we have mechanisms and things there where people can afford to pay low rent for the formative years of their lives when they're in their late teens through early 30s, are able to save up down payments. My camera keeps cutting out. It's overheated. I think this discussion was getting very, very heated, so I cut off. But ultimately, let's wrap this all up. Ultimately, there's a lot of things that we can change in this market, right? And there's a lot of ways that we can try to solve this housing crisis. We have to work together and we have to point it out, right? The point of this podcast, yeah, I'm informing people on the state of the market, but I also want to inform people on what they should be talking about when they speak to the people who can actually make some of these changes. So next time you see your politicians or speak to anyone that is in positions of power, relay that this is an affordability crisis. But on that note, let's end this on a positive thing, is that there are opportunities out there for affordable pieces of real estate in Toronto. If you're able to buy and you're in a position where you're looking at properties and you say, hey, my budget is $800,000-900,000, which is a lot of money. But if you do have those budgets, there are opportunities in the city of Toronto where you can buy a house, a townhouse, or a family-sized condo and be in the city of Toronto. And again, reach out because I can help you find those. So that does it for today. That's it for the Under the Radar Real Estate Podcast. So if you like this podcast, if you like what you watched, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and that's it. And join me next month for the podcast where we'll go through all of this again, and I'll probably rant about the affordability crisis here in Toronto. So as always, peace out.